Hey everybody, this is Christine from School for Joy, and tonight I wanted to talk about self-care. Self-care is something that we hear about a lot. It's definitely become a buzzword, and people talk about having their glass of wine, getting a manicure and pedicure. And while those are definitely forms of self care, there is a lot more to self care than that. We want to think about self care in terms of what it does for you in nourishing kind of your mind, body, and soul. And there are actually 8 different types of self care. So I wanted to talk about each of those tonight and just go through them and kind of talk about what each one um, looks like. And also keep in mind that they kind of overlap from time to time. So you will, as we go through them, you'll see what I mean. So the first form of self-care is physical self-care, and I think that people think about that a lot. Again, with the whole idea of getting massage or manicure, pedicure, facial, that kind of thing, and that is definitely self-care. But the more kind of urgent type of self-care um, is really just making sure that you are physically taking care of yourself. Are you eating well? Are you getting enough rest? Are you hydrating? Are you moving your body? Um, because those are you listening to your body? I think one of the things that we all tend to do is push ourselves harder than we should and ignore the signs that we're getting from our bodies that we're starting to feel run down. We're not sleeping well because our stress level is high, and we keep pushing, 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 and feeling like I can't stop. I've got all this stuff to do. I can't take a day off. I can't just put my feet up for the weekend and relax. I just have to keep moving. And so part of physical self-care is really tuning into your body and thinking about what it is that you need to take care of yourself physically. Because if you're not physically healthy, then the rest of it doesn't really, you know, it's a lot harder to do things if you don't have your health. And there are certainly enough challenges around health and well-being anyway, with a lot of things that are going on. So you want to do everything that you can to maintain your physical health and make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And then once you have that, think of that as your baseline. Once you have that, then you can start to think about the more kind of fun things, which are, you know, going and having a massage or a manicure or, whatever it is that makes you feel good. And, and it can also be about taking care of your appearance. Even if you're stuck home, when you look in the mirror, what are you looking at? How does that make you feel? And what can you do to just feel like you are looking your best and feeling your best? So the second form of self-care is intellectual self-care, which is just keeping your mind stimulated and active. And I think this is really important right now with everything that's going on, because we're a lot more limited in our activities and what we're doing. And so it's really important to feel like we're not stagnating. I also think it's kind of can be a little bit challenging at times. I mean, intellectual self care consists of things like reading, listening to podcasts or documentaries, even something like a crossword puzzle or a jigsaw puzzle, anything that gets your mind moving. But I think it can be hard because I feel like I don't really want to listen to the news a lot these days, whereas before I've never honestly been an avid reader of the newspaper, but I've gone through phases and I would spend time reading about things that were interesting. And now I can't avoid the front page, and so I just don't look at all. If I'm looking, I end up looking at the front page, which then elevates my stress level. So I'm kind of cutting myself off from things that I might have been interested in reading about otherwise. And also spending so much time in front of the computer, I don't really feel like being in front of it on my downtime. And most of the ways that I get my news is, digitally. So, and I think that's true for a lot of people. So, just thinking about how to keep yourself stimulated intellectually as we go through all of this, so that you feel like your brain isn't starting to, um, fall apart. And I think we've all had our moments, especially during COVID, where simple things we just can't remember. We can't remember somebody's name. We can't remember, um, you know, the person that we spoke to last week, or the name of a place that we used to go to all the time when we were in college. So we're all struggling with that. And so the more you can do to keep your mind active and stimulated, the better. Professional self-care is another type of self-care, and that may not be something that you think about when you think about self-care. It's not really something that I thought about, but until recently. But professional self-care is, you know, about keeping those boundaries between work and home, which if you're now working from home is harder and harder to do. Um, because obviously the boundaries tend to be blurred, and you always have your computer at home, so you might think to yourself, oh, you know what, 20 minutes and then I'll be done. But it's really important to try and maintain those boundaries so that you do have, um, a line between your work life and your home life. So trying to create structures, to help keep you efficient and kind of focused in, at one time you're focusing on work and then you have a time where you're focusing on home. And trying to keep those separate is a way of trying to maintain those boundaries, which again is really challenging right now, as we are working from home more and more. And if you're used to commuting, and especially if you were someone who took public transportation, that commute home, while it could be frustrating at times, was also sort of a transition period between work and home. And even if you were driving home, again, you had that transition. You kind of had the buffer, between the office and home, which you may not have anymore if you're not commuting. But think about, can you take 20 minutes to do something to kind of decompress before you are completely focused on home life? That may help you be a little bit more present, um, and so that you can focus on your family. Of course, if you are trying to work from home and you've got young children, who are running around, or you're trying to oversee their education, it is hugely challenging. But something to think about is how you could even have your kids, especially, and we're talking younger kids that need a lot of attention, but can you start to, um, the word that's coming to mind is train, and I don't like that word because it sounds like we're talking about a pet, but kind of help them develop a decompression period where, okay, 20 minutes of quiet time, everyone's going to be reading, or you have to be in your room and you can play quietly. I'm going to take my time and, be quiet and kind of recharge my batteries, and to start to, help your children develop those habits as well. Um, and you're setting that example. Hello, I'm seeing some more people jump on. I would love it if you say hi in the comments. So glad that you're here. So we are talking about self-care tonight, the 8 different types of self-care. And the next one, so we've talked about physical self-care, intellectual self-care, professional self-care, and financial self-care is next. Hi, Anne-Marie. How are you? Thank you for coming. Um, so financial self-care, which is, obviously kind of keeping track of your finances, knowing what you're spending, what you're bringing in, trying to live within your means. And, this is a particularly stressful time for people, where, people have lost their jobs or taken pay cuts. And so money is definitely something that is on a lot of people's minds right now. If you can think about paying off debt, that is wonderful. And if you can't, if you can try to keep it at bay. And also just thinking about what are some of your triggers around money? What are some of the limiting beliefs that you have? And are there routines that you can put into place to kind of soothe some of those anxieties? So, for example, when you pay your bills, how can you set it up so that if nothing else, at least it's sort of a calm, quiet environment? So maybe you've got music playing, you light a candle, and then you sit down and you look at your bills and you pay them, and it may be stressful, but if you kind of set yourself up so that you have a calm environment around you, it can start to alleviate a little bit of that stress. And then you start to, it's sort of that Pavlovian experience where you start to associate something positive with paying bills, and that can help alleviate stress as well. So finances are definitely can be a tricky one, and it depends on, especially depending on where you are. But the more that you can think about, especially if you are in a difficult situation, thinking about what you can do to kind of move forward and maybe address some of the issues or the challenges that you may have. And sometimes it's thinking about, do I need to make changes? Do I need to cut back in some way? Do I need to look for another job? There are lots of questions around money, but asking those questions and being honest with yourself is really important, even though it can be very uncomfortable and it's not something that most people enjoy dealing with, but it also does cause a lot of stress. So if you can kind of come to terms with that and address those issues, it can help you alleviate some of the stress around it. The fifth, I think, form of self-care is spiritual self-care. And this may or may not be religious, depending on who you are and what your belief system is, but it's really about what is it that feeds your soul? What is it that really just makes you feel one with the world and puts you in a happy place? And it can be, and this is a place where there can be overlap, because for a lot of people, exercise is a spiritual practice. It's also a physical form of self-care. Walking in nature, meditation, some people go fishing, whatever it is that really just kind of brings you back to yourself and helps you feel good in your life, would be spiritual self-care. So journaling, meditation, anything that really just helps you feel good where you are. Social self-care is another form of self-care to think about. And part of that is balancing our needs for being social with our needs for, having time to ourselves. And depending, obviously now the whole social piece is a little different and challenging, to say the least. But thinking about, and so for now, it's in some ways the bigger challenge is figuring out how to get that socializing in a way that's safe. But sometimes it can be, how to say no to social commitments so that you can kind of take some time to be on your own and decompress and just kind of process life. So finding that balance between spending time alone and spending time with friends is something that's really important. And then depending on whether you are an introvert or an extrovert, that's obviously going to influence the way that you deal with that and what works best for you in terms of social self-care. Environmental self-care is another one. So, if your house is really cluttered or messy, that is going to add to the stress in your life. So what can you do to, clear things out? And, depending on your living situation, you may or may not have full control over that. And if you don't, can you create a space for yourself? It doesn't have to be a whole room. If you have a whole room, that is great, but it can be a corner, it can be a closet if you need to. It can even be just a small bookshelf that you can kind of sit in front of, and you can put some photographs that you love, light a candle. There are lots of different ways that you can think about your physical environment, and depending on what your living situation is, you can get creative with what works for you. But also, just think about what are the little things that you can be doing on a regular basis that just add to that feeling of comfort and security. Like, for example, in my bedroom, I have I can't like right now I have a pumpkin candle, and then I have fairy lights on my windows. And so, I don't do it every night, but often if I'm reading in bed, I will light the candle and I put the fairy lights on, and it's just a calm, serene environment, and it just makes me feel good. Or when I'm cooking dinner, I listen to music, and that helps because I don't really like to cook. So it puts me in a better mood. I wish it did something for the quality of my cooking, but you can't have everything. But that is another way of just taking care of myself through my environment. And a lot of the time, it's little things like buying yourself flowers, or lighting that candle, opening the window so you can feel the breeze. There are lots of small things that we can do that are not big effort, but have kind of a big return, especially when you're doing them throughout your day. The returns start to add up, and they really start to make a difference. And it really helps bring the joy into your life because you start to appreciate those smaller things. So think about the types of things that you can do, or going and having your coffee out on the deck in the morning, um, reading outside, things like that are all really beneficial, and those are all forms of self care. And then the last form of self care is emotional self care. So that one really kind of is woven through the rest of them, but you know, and emotional and spiritual self care are pretty closely connected. Again, what are the things that just make you feel good? Um, what makes you laugh? Are you laughing on a regular basis? Are you feeling joyful? Um, do you feel emotionally connected to people? Do you, want to reach out and volunteer, or call a friend that you haven't talked to in a while? So the emotional piece of it is really important, and that's something that you want to be sensitive to and make sure that um, you are taking care of that aspect of yourself as well. So those are the 8 forms of self-care, and they're all important in their own way. But I would say that if you are kind of new on the self-care journey, think about what you gravitate toward, and it's really about what is it that helps you feel good and feel like you can be the best version of yourself. What alleviates stress and helps you feel connected to yourself and to the people around you. But I do think that we have a lot of resistance to implementing self-care in our lives, especially for women. Well, I think it's true for everyone, but women, um, particularly if they have children, they feel like they are responsible for taking care of their children. Really, it doesn't matter how old they are, but obviously there are some stages that are a lot more demanding than others. And so it's really easy to just kind of back burner your own self care and feel like it's not something that you have time for. And often a lot of people feel like taking care of themselves is selfish, and that their time is better spent doing something else. But the truth is that if you're not taking care of yourself, it's really hard to take care of anyone else. If you are frazzled and tired and irritable, that you're not going to be giving your best self to anyone else. So taking that time, even if it's 10 or 15 minutes a day, is a really important way to take care of yourself so that you can take care of other people. And if you do have young children, um, thinking about what you're modeling for them. You know, what do you want them to be doing for themselves? And so if you're modeling how you take care of yourself, then that's what they're going to see, and hopefully that's what they're going to emulate. And so you're going to help them develop the self-care habits as well. So I just wanted to end with a little bit of tapping around self-care, and just the idea that, you know, I don't have time, or I feel weird about it, or, you know, it seems selfish. So just as a way of kind of relaxing the body a little bit and kind of shifting the mindset. So it's going to be quick, and I'm going to take my glasses off to do it. And so you can just tap and repeat after me, and I will call out the points as we go. So we're going to start on the karate chop point, which is the side of your hand, with our setup statement. So even though self-care can be hard to fit in, and I feel guilty when I do it sometimes, I choose to love and accept myself. Even though putting myself first feels selfish, I choose to love and accept myself anyway. Even though I feel overwhelmed with everything that's on my plate, and fitting in self-care feels kind of hard, I choose to love myself anyway. Okay, eyebrow point. Self-care is really hard to fit in. Side of the eye. It feels really selfish. Under the eye. And I do have self-care. Under the nose. I have my glass of wine. Under the mouth. I binge watch Netflix. Collarbone. I get my nails done or have a massage from time to time. Under the arm. But is that really self-care? Top of the head. I mean, those are all great, but is that really feeding my soul? Eyebrow point. Do those things make me feel connected to myself and others? Eyebrow point. Why does self-care feel so selfish? Under the eye. Why does it make me so uncomfortable? Under the nose. Why do I feel guilty? Under the mouth. If I take care of myself, I'm in a better place to take care of others. Collarbone. I can be more present. Under the arm. I'm a better version of myself when I take care of myself. Top of the head. I am open to taking time for myself. Eyebrow point. Making time for some self-care each day. Side of the eye. Even if it's only 10 to 15 minutes. Under the eye. Self-care is important. Under the nose. I want to model taking care of myself for my children. Under the mouth. I want to be present for them. Collarbone. And when I take care of myself, I am more present and grounded. Under the arm. I choose to be open to self-care. Top of the head. I am open to taking care of myself so that I can give my best self to the world. Okay, so take a deep breath. And hopefully you feel a little bit more relaxed. And if you have resistance to the idea of taking some time for self-care, hopefully that feels a little bit diminished, and the idea of finding some time just to do something that makes you feel good seems a little bit more likely and a little bit, more possible. Um, so thank you so much for joining me tonight, and I hope that you found this helpful. And I will be here next week. Have a great night. Bye.